Rorikstead, a cosy, unassuming farming village to the west of Whiterun, situated but a stone's throw from the Hold's border with the Reach. At first, you may dismiss this place as unimportant, the simple life on offer here too modest, perhaps even boring. But of course, it's humble farmsteads such as this that serve as a societal backbone, for if you cannot eat, you cannot live. And so, despite its mundane exterior, villages like Rorikstead possess an unparalleled importance that often goes unnoticed when the youth pursue adventure and purpose. Lofty dreams of action and heroism, their names sung in folk tales forevermore. For those who succeed, who cares about dull old home? But Rorikstead here might not be so dull after all, for despite its appearance as a rather uninteresting farming settlement, Rorikstead is said to be home to quite the conspiracy, in a theory that's been circulating online for years, as far as I can tell, ever since the game came out in 2011. But do these theories have any basis whatsoever, and better yet, do they possess any substance at all? So in today's video you can expect us to be exploring the lofty theory surrounding this place, as suggested by more than a handful in the comment sections of previous Skyrim videos uploaded on this channel. So grab yourselves a biscuit, perhaps even a brew, or indeed a tankard of ale, as we explore the Rorikstead conspiracy. To begin with, let's find our way to Rorikstead. As I said before, it's situated to the west of Whiterun by some distance, albeit still within the confines of the grassy Hold. The road to it is reasonably perilous, and when you arrive, there's no telling if a dragon might attack or not. It appears to be a hotspot, a bit like Falkreath. They're both constantly under attack by dragons, so naturally the best tactic is to lure the dragon away so it doesn't kill any NPCs and end its life. Nonetheless, with that irritation dealt with, let's venture into the village and see what we can find out. At a glance, it just seems like a couple of farms, and while I've got a mod enabled that gives it just a little bit more going on along with the rest of Skyrim, my focus shall of course be exclusive to the vanilla aspects. A couple of farms including their farmhouses, an inn because where would we be without a surplus of alcohol, and a couple of other homes, one of which is actually within the town, the other is not. Our first point of observation is Cowflop Farm, run by a high elf named Reldith and a redguard named Ennis. We get the impression their farm is quite prosperous, and nothing immediately seems awry. However, it is in dialogue that things start to get a bit more curious.
Did you see those guards? Get out of line and you'll have them to deal with.
Kinnell man, I just came over to say that your farm is doing very well and you must be proud.
Do I detect a bit of jealousy in your tone? I would hardly blame you. What calling could be more noble than this? I see in your eyes that you think I jest. I assure you I don't. I am proud, and rightfully so, of the work we do here. Working the soil with your hands, seeing your seeds take root and grow, tending a herd. There is a joy in honest labor you won't find elsewhere.
From Reldith we learn that she is incredibly proud of the success of her farm. We also learn in further conversation that it's Ennis who handles the business side of things and mostly sells produce in the city of Whiterun, whereas Reldith is more introverted. As for Ennis, he cannot be engaged in open dialogue outside of one quest, and 3 of his 4 passing greetings can be summarised with the same summary I provided for Reldith's explanation for his function within the business, and the 4th is this.
You talked to Reldith yet? She's like a mother to me.
A nice sentiment, and at first it would appear to be nothing more. So momentarily moving on, should we linger on the farm for a bit, a few more characters show up. First of all, we have Rorik. Clad in finery, it would appear he is the settlement's lord. So why don't we go and have a chin wag with him?
If you've got some business in Rorikstead, you should start by speaking to Jouane.
It would appear he's not the most interested in chatting, however we can ask him if the town of Rorikstead is named after him, to which he will say the following.
Yes, that's right. Look around you. Most of the lands you see are mine. Most of this I purchased while my comrades were fighting in the south, helping the Empire against the Aldmeri Dominion. Back then, nothing would grow here, and so the land was worthless. Now, thanks to the hard work and the gods' blessings, our farms prosper.
So Rorik effectively claims that he founded this village during the Great War, and those 2 and a bit at a push 3 decades ago, nothing would grow here. Miraculously, under his ownership of the lands, that fortune has been turned around, and Rorikstead, presumably named after him, is now a thriving farming community. However, the suggestion that he founded Rorikstead, and it's indeed named after him, is inconsistent with other information we can find in-game. Take for instance a book we can acquire upon successfully acquiring the Dragonstone for Farengar in Dragon's Reach. That is of course the Holdings of Jarl Gjalland, a document that according to Farengar dates back to the First Era, if not even further. Among the many listed holdings we get Rorikstead, a small farmstead in the Western Plains, known for grain, leather and horses. And sure enough, Rorikstead circa the 4th era is situated in the plains to the west of Whiterun. Furthermore, the book Songs of Skyrim reminds us of a particular bard's song, a supposed traditional song of Whiterun that I somehow doubt is only 30 years old at most.
Oh, there once was a hero named Ragnar the Red who came riding to Whiterun from old Rorikstead.
This would at the very least suggest there was an old Rorikstead, and considering Ragnar the Red rode to Whiterun from it, I'd imagine it probably was in a similar location to the current Rorikstead, so it's convenient a fellow named Rorik founded a town in the area and called it Rorikstead as well. For all we know, however, it could be a coincidence, and Rorikstead could be an entirely different township to Old Rorikstead or Roriksteading. The other book of note is the Atlas of Dragons compiled in the 373rd year of the Second Era, which makes mention of a dragon burial mound west of Rorikstead. And sure enough, a stone's throw to the west of Rorikstead, we can indeed find a dragon burial mound. This very well may be an element of oversight in Skyrim's development, but based on the information we have, the idea of Rorikstead being named after Rorik doesn't appear to be true. But this is not the mystery at hand, as puzzling as it may be. In fact, I only truly mention it because if I don't, it's all the comment section will be filled with. But let's move off of that and ask if Rorik fought in the Great War.
Aye, that I did. I commanded a force of several dozen men, most of them levies from villages in this part of the hold. I damn near met my end in that war. An old merry soldier ran me through with his blade, left me for dead. A healer named Jouane saved my life. He's been my closest friend ever since. I tell you, that man is a miracle worker.
So in his military career, Rorik was impaled, but his life was saved thanks to the healing efforts of his since best friend, Jouane. He has the appearance and demeanour of a gentle old man, but it's in conversation with him where this conspiracy theory appears to take hold. So let's go and have a chat and see what he has to say.
If you're thinking of setting up to farm, you picked the right place. Peace and prosperity are all the good folk of Rorikstead want in life.
Your farms are thriving, even despite the harsh climate. What's your secret?
Secret? What makes you think there's a secret? There are no secrets here, my curious friend. Our prosperity is simply the result of hard work, good fortune, and the blessings of the gods.
Now curiously, he fixated on the use of the word secret there a bit too much, especially since the question "what's your secret" in such a complimentary context uses the word secret itself rather generally. It doesn't imply there's an actual secret. Jouane's response, however, is a tad defensive, albeit polite. However, you've got to remember this is a game and that's deliberate. Jouane's response, the fact that we can even ask, paired with Rorik's claim that nothing would grow here when he purchased the land not 3 decades ago, makes it apparent the game is drawing attention to this aspect. Furthermore, in conversation with a fellow named Eric, he says this: "Your crops seem to be thriving."
It's true. For as long as I can remember, our crops have always done well. I'm not sure whether it's the soil, climate, or the favor of the divines, but we've never had a poor harvest.
Now that seems a tad unrealistic, doesn't it? Now in fairness, this is a game about magic and dragons, but never having a poor harvest, not even once, despite nothing initially growing here, in a tundra-dominated climate not realistically suitable for farming, at least to the scale that Rorikstead is thriving, surely that would take constant, repetitive miracles. I'm not arguing it's impossible, but the environment certainly isn't the most ideal. Therefore, surely fluctuations in yield would be expected, especially since the game actually allows us to raise the point of the harsh climate not seemingly obstructing Rorikstead, and this contradictory message from Eric that the climate might actually be aiding them. Nonetheless, we know from Rorik the lands were barren when he arrived here. It's clear the game wants us to view Jouane's response to our compliment as a startled one, and the Rorikstead conspiracy hinges on another reason being responsible for Rorikstead's high yield, despite every other detail telling us it shouldn't be this way. And if you aren't on board yet, listen to this conversation between Rorik and Jouane.
We've had better luck with our planting than any village in the hold.
Luck? I think it has more to do with the hard work and good soil.
Maybe you're right. Even so, I can't help wondering if some other force is at work here.
This does suggest that Rorik is oblivious to whatever it is we're looking for, but the takeaway is, even he is suspicious of his own village's success. And like I said, this being a game, that's deliberate. As for Jouane, we now have two instances where it's very clear he's trying to point the narrative of Rorikstead's agricultural success towards the hard work of the farming residents, perhaps humbly. And while it's not open and shut that that's not the case, the game is directing us towards being suspicious of Jouane. After all, as Rorik puts it,
I tell you, that man is a miracle worker.
The only question, of course, is has he been working his miracles? Now, we know during the Great War he was a healer. Now, considering the extent of Rorik's injuries, we can assume he likely used magical abilities to save his life. And though he only outright states he was a healer during the Great War...
Have you met Rorik? He owns these lands, and it's from him that our village gets its name. We've been friends for many years now. Rorik fought for the Empire in the Great War. He was gravely wounded, and so was brought before me. I was a healer then, you see. We were as close as kinsmen, and when Rorik returned home, I came with him. I'm happy to spend my twilight years here with my good friend.
There's evidence to suggest the old Breton keeps up with his magical past. You see, the second farm in Rorikstead is run by a fellow named Lemkill. He has two daughters, Britta and Sissel, whom he has nothing but contempt for.
Do yourself a favor and don't have children. They're good for nothing at all. I spend every day tending the fields, and what do my daughters do? Nothing. Complain and caterwaul, sleep and eat. Useless. Curse my good-for-nothing daughters. My wife was twice the woman they'll ever grow to be. She gave her life birthing them. What a waste.
Unlike the traditional parent trope of moaning about the kids but secretly loving them, I have no doubts that Lemkill here genuinely believes his venom and hates his daughters. Why? Well, his wife died birthing them. We will have to park that aspect and come back to it later, for this dynamic is darker still.
Most days, I do all I can to stay away from my sister and my father. The beating's the same from either one.
Sissel confides in us that her father's nastiness is physical as well, and worse yet, her father's behaviour has moulded her sister into a bully.
Look at you! You're as filthy as a pig in a pen. I am not. You're lying. You smell like a pig's pen too. What a stink. Have you been rolling in the dirt all day? You're a liar. I won't listen to you. Leave me alone.
As sad as this information is, it's actually the other things that Sissel says to us that strike me as the most interesting.
Someday soon I'll stop being afraid. Jouane is teaching me magic. He says I'm real good.
If Sissel is to be believed, Jouane Manette is teaching her magic. Perhaps he took pity on her. Considering Rorikstead is primarily a Nord village in Skyrim, I suspect this is not common knowledge among locals. After all, Nords in general are quite distrustful of magic, so should the entire village know, at best the tutoring will end, and if this following dialogue is to be believed, nobody would gun for that more so than Lemkill himself.
Good day, Lemkill. I saw some nice dresses for your little girls while I was in Whiterun. I'd be happy to purchase them if you like.
We don't need your charity, Breton. If my girls deserve something nice, it'll be their father who buys it.
Considering his contempt for his girls, I suspect that's an impossible bar to clear. He doesn't want them to have nice things because he views his spawn as rotten. And considering how that disdain has manifested in abuse, I doubt he'd be awfully keen on one of his victims, let's be real here, ever being in a position of power over him. And so for this, and I'm sure many other reasons, Sissel is instead instructed in secret.
By the 8, keep your voice down. Do you want the entire village to learn our secrets?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you.
Shh, shh. It's fine, child. It's fine. But we must be cautious, What we do, the things I teach you, the others wouldn't understand.
I understand. I'm sorry. I just get so excited thinking about it. So, can we do some fire magic?
Most certainly not. But perhaps I can teach you how to put some candles out. We'll start there.
Ooh, wonderful! I can't wait!
This establishes that Jouane is indeed a man of secrets, and while we found nothing to suggest malintent, we can finally answer his aforementioned rhetorical question.
Secret? What makes you think there's a secret?
The fact that we've already uncovered one. We'll ignore the fact that Sissel was basically blurting this by the bonfire outside of Jouane and Rorik's home, in front of at least half of the village. These conversations don't exactly trigger in precise scenarios, and considering the NPC dialogue slop from Oblivion...
I see. Bye.
Take care. Greetings!
Yes, Skyrim was one hell of an advancement. Now, as something of a side note, Sissel has one other piece of dialogue that's incredibly fascinating.
I had a dream that there was a good dragon. He was old and grey, but he wasn't scary.
Sorry, you what? Sissel here has been having visions manifesting in dreams of none other than Parthenax, the friendly old grey dragon living atop the throat of the world as the head of the Greybeards. He fits the bill of Sissel's description rather well, and as I'm sure you're aware, and I don't mean to insult your intelligence, he is integral to the main story of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Now, I doubt she's aware she's doing this, otherwise she would not refer to them as dreams. Sissel seems to have no awareness of the notion that what she saw in her dream might be real, but if she's innately gifted with some form of magical ability, it would make far more sense for Jouane to take such an interest in her specifically. Not that he isn't just a general busybody, you see him go about his business, he has conversations with more or less everyone in town, but perhaps he's motivated to take the risk of taking on such a young pupil because one way or another he became aware of her gift. Does this mean he has his own agenda? Well, perhaps, but also perhaps not. But were he somehow using his magicka to ensure a bountiful harvest for the farming community of Rorikstead, it's worth remembering he's not a young man and will inevitably wish to pass that baton on. So observing a child in the village with a natural attitude for magic, it's too good of an opportunity to pass up and is therefore worth the risk. So that entire idea that he is indeed up to something does provide him with a motivation for undertaking such an endeavour in his old age. But what is that possible purpose? Well, we know the game's drawing attention to the unlikelihood of Rorikstead's cosy existence and consistent year-in, year-out good harvests. That is an interesting trend, so perhaps we would be well served looking for other trends within the village of Rorikstead. And an interesting one does come to mind. And it is something. Here's the split between adult male and female NPCs inhabiting the villages of Iverstead, Riverwood, Carthwesten, and Dragonbridge. And now, take a look at how Rorikstead factors. Though there's a noticeable difference in all of them, the ratio in Rorikstead in particular stands out here, with only one adult female NPC versus the 6 blokes getting about the place. I should add I've got a mod installed that adds a bunch of generic NPCs into the background of locations such as this, which may backfire in the argument I'm making if I don't mention it. But when you look at the named residents of towns, not including guards, Rorikstead's gender demographic is a lot more mono than average. Now that could very well mean nothing, but let's recall what Lemkill said earlier.
My wife was twice the woman they'll ever grow to be. She gave her life birthing them.
We learned that Lemkill's wife died giving birth to Sissel and Britta, and that's not the only instance of such a thing happening within Rorikstead. Hey Eric, have you lived here all your life?
Born and raised right here in Rorikstead. My father was a soldier. He fought in the Great War, and when it was over, he retired here to raise a family. My mother passed away when I was just a babe, so he did his best to raise me on his own.
So that's 2 instances within Rorikstead of women dying either during childbirth or following childbirth, which makes for an interesting coincidence, and I am aware of how conjecture-based this entire video may be coming across. Now, a 3rd instance of this happening in Rorikstead would certainly crop up as much more interesting than even that. And well, there might very well be one. So if you'd be so kind as to bear with me, let's head to Lund's hut. Situated just outside of Rorikstead, off the road to the north, Lund's hut can be found surrounded by aggressive skeevers. They'll try to attack us, but they're frankly some of the easiest enemies in the game, so that isn't a threat. However, it's within the house that we can find Lund's remains along with more oversized rat creatures, and it's surely easy enough to conclude the skeevers are what killed him. However, the evidence points to another explanation. He died in his own bed, and there are many bowls on the ground, along with a mounted skeever head above the fireplace, suggesting the skeevers were actually his pets. In his absence, the skeevers have obviously overrun and ruined his home. But it's on his table, to which there is only one chair, that we can find a bottle of poison, painting the picture of a fate quite sad indeed. Outside his home we can find a cairn, notably marked with an article of clothing and a ring, a wedding band perhaps. Could this be the grave of Lund's wife? If so, it certainly becomes curious as to how she died. It would certainly be one hell of an assumption to suggest she might have been with child at the time. And yet you could see how it would fit narratively. In wake of his wife and perhaps even unborn child's deaths, Lund took to raising skeevers because not only was he robbed of the love of his life, but also of being a father. And the dynamic of having a pet, or indeed several, can be viewed from a similar lens. Ultimately, however, this didn't fill the void for him. He chose to head to a different kind of void altogether. Like I said, this video is dominated with conjecture, but let's roll with the idea that that hugely unfounded assumption has some truth to it. It would make the concept of a woman dying in childbirth in Rorikstead not just a one-off tragedy or a 2-time coincidence, but a trend. One reflected in the demographics of the population. Every woman who we know was, or could have been with child, is dead. And as for Reldith, she's a mother-like figure to Ennis, whom she took in and adopted, so to speak.
Another fine day at work in the fields. I don't envy those city folk who miss out on the joys of working the land.
I'll tell you who I don't envy. Those poor children who lost their parents in this war.
Lives lost, crops burned, land ruined. There's no greater sin than war. And yet, you were an orphan, and you've made something of your life.
I was lucky. If you hadn't rescued me, I'd probably be a thief, a mercenary, or something even worse.
It's too fine a day to dwell on such things. Let's get back to work, and forget about wars and orphans for a while.
So the only thing that comes remotely close to a mother and son dynamic that Rorikstead actually has is between an Ultima and a Redguard orphan she took in. In this, the game gives us a potential explanation for why Reldith is immune to Rorikstead's askew demographic. Maybe she's unable to bear children of her own, but more likely she's unlikely to, being an Ultima in a Nord village. So the village has a lack of fertile women, but an abundance of fertile soil, to the point where even Rorik is aware of the possibility that it might not be entirely natural.
Even so, I can't help wondering if some other force is at work here.
And he's not the only one who seems to be aware of how special the soil actually is.
Rorikstead must have the richest soil in the hold.
Maybe we should start selling the soil along with the dung. We could make a tidy profit.
Who in their right mind would pay for dirt? You'd get laughed out of Whiterun for even trying it.
Hey, people paid money for stranger things. Take our cow dung. We sell that by the wagon load.
When you're rich, you can waste as much money as you like on far-fetched business ideas. In the meantime, there's a farm to run.
That was a peculiar pivot by Reldith, wasn't it? If the soil truly is that rich, selling it isn't an alien idea. And yet she shoots down Ennis's progressive farming business mindset. It's almost as if she's protective of the very soil itself. In her defense, it does sound like a ludicrous idea at first, but as Ennis puts it, they already sell cow dung by the wagon load. And look, if you can sell people literal shit, you can sell them mud. And thus Reldith bringing up the soil being so rich in casual conversation only to shoot Ennis down immediately after he suggests selling some of it for the integral agricultural properties it possesses, has got me wondering if perhaps she knows something. Perhaps she believes attempting to sell some soil might lead to a demand for more of it, and furthermore it might not actually work anywhere else. Perhaps she and Jouane are secretly in cahoots about the whole thing. There is, after all, this conversation to take into consideration.
I picked up a set of fine silver brushes in the city, Reldith. I thought you might be interested.
How thoughtful. I'll come take a look after supper.
So the two plan to link up in the evening, because the Breton mage generously purchased some silver brushes for her. It could, of course, be an entirely innocent conversation. We've seen Jouane engage in conversation with various characters. He can't be in cahoots with the lot. Or it could just be a code term for "we need to meet tonight." That's how I've seen it presented anyway, but I have my doubts. However, there is a curious detail shared between their homes in particular. On one of the master bed's bedside tables in Calflop Farm, we can sight a rather bog-standard looking soul gem, not one powerful enough to hold a humanoid soul, but it's certainly eyebrow-raising for that to be deliberately placed. Now in Jouane Manette and Rorik's home, we can sight this mini bar. On one of the shelves is another soul gem, and along with it a rather interesting book that only shows up a handful of times throughout the entire game, Spirit of the Daedra. The book appears to have been written by an anonymous Dremora that expresses the difference between the mortals of Nirn and what dwells in the many planes of Oblivion, including how these entities, or at least the more intelligent ones, view mortals. And the answer to that question is simply put as prey. It is a beyond curious rare document to keep around, and considering this house is shared between Rorik and Jouane, there's technically a 50-50 chance that it's Jouane's. However, Rorik is a retired soldier turned landowner, whereas Jouane was and is a practicing mage. And I know which of those would take more interest in such a topic. So what could the Breton's interest in the Daedra be, as it's the only book in the house? It may very well be curiosity, but what if he's been researching the Daedra for a purpose? Could there, therefore, be some obscure, ritualistic explanation behind Rorikstead's inexplicably successful agriculture? Let's not jump to conclusions. Also, in every building in Rorikstead, for some reason I keep happening upon robes and chests and things. I don't know if this is random, but I thought it was interesting. Why does everyone in this village seemingly have avant-garde robes laying around? In my research, this appears to be something other players have noticed, but I haven't seen it consistently brought up. But finding daft things randomly placed in chests and wardrobes in towns, villages and cities isn't exclusive to Rorikstead, so I'm reluctant to use that as evidence, pointing towards a cult of some description or something crazy. And if anything, most of the interactions within the town suggest that it's, for the most part, just a tight-knit farming community. And were the town reclusive, like a cult in theory would be, there'd be no suggesting that we go help Eric resolve his father problem and embark on a new life as an adventurer. And I mean, should you not spring into action on that immediately, everyone will suggest you go and help him out. Furthermore, information suggests that Rorik, though suspicious, has no clue about anything going on. And if anyone were to know something, it would be Jouane Manette, and that the mother of all stretches may be Reldith. Perhaps Sissel too, if she's to inherit the secret. The question, of course, is could that have anything to do with the Daedra? Well, we know Rorikstead is lacking in the womenfolk department. We also know that it's got an abundance of fertile soil somehow, despite the lands once upon a time being quite barren. With the village's farming past hinging on leather, horses and grain, could a pact therefore have been made with a Daedric prince or other entity in order to secure the versatile farming future of Rorikstead? Perhaps our answer lies in Lund's hut, or more accurately, outside it while inside it, if that makes sense. Falun's hut's interior has this strange exterior space, not typical of interiors in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. It can only be accessed by clipping or using FreeCam, and if you've got an eagle eye and the YouTube compression system is holding up, you might notice a book repeatedly respawning and falling into nothingness. And this book is none other than the Book of Daedra. It's an encyclopedic tome that appears to focus on telling Daedric princes apart, and from it we can learn the Daedric prince Clavicus Vile's sphere is the granting of power and wishes through ritual invocations and pact. And so from this book that we found in an inaccessible, incomplete area of the interior of Lund's hut, we've identified a Daedric prince that may or may not be willing to enter such a pact with Jouane Manette, fertile soil for the village's population's innate ability to reproduce. But is this truly how the Daedric Prince of Bargains operates? I don't think it's that cut and dry. You see, he's also known as the Prince of Trickery. Should we partake in his quest in Skyrim, we find his shrine swarmed by vampires. Vampires wishing to be cured of their vampirism. Naturally, they aren't friendly to us, so we have to kill them. And here's what Vile has to say about this.
They were suffering so from vampirism and begged me for a cure. Then you came and ended their misery. I couldn't have planned it better myself.
It's clear that Vile likes granting wishes technically and literally. In us killing those vampires, we technically freed them from their vampirism. But we also ended their lives. However, I doubt the vampires mentioned that at any point. So, based on how we're led to believe they articulated their desire, we granted it. Once that's dealt with, Vile sends us to acquire a weapon known as the Rueful Axe. And should we ask Barbas about its name, here's what he has to say about it.
One of Clavicus's little Jess, a wizard named Sebastian Lord, had a daughter who worshipped her scene. When the daughter became a werewolf, it drove Sebastian over the edge. He couldn't stand to see his little girl take on such a bestial form. The wizard wished for the ability to end his daughter's curse. Clavicus gave him an axe.
Sebastian Lort's mistake was asking Vile to end his daughter's curse, not lift it. More accurately, he asked Vile to help him end his daughter's curse. As a result of such wording, an axe is just as good. So Clavicus Vile takes pleasure in granting wishes how they were asked, and observing the outcome provides him with amusement. And so we've learned that whatever deal is struck with Clavicus Vile, he likes to put his own spin on it. And at least in Skyrim, these spins have something in common. The vampires in Haymar's Shame seeking a cure for their vampirism. We show up and end their lives. Sebastian Lort sought aid in ending his daughter's lycanthropy. Vile grants Lort an axe for the purpose of ending her life, and should we retrieve said rueful axe and bring it back to Lord Vile, he'll ask us to kill Barbas. Fertile soil, infallible harvests, and high produce in exchange for reproducing within Rorikstead, resulting in a woman's death. That does seem like the kind of thing he would take pleasure in. However, if that bargain's been struck for a good 2 decades, it doesn't explain why Jouane Manette would be researching Daedra now. Unless, of course, he seeks a means to end the pact altogether. As in ensuring a future for Rorikstead through it originally, now it's done a 180 and actually actively jeopardizes the future of Rorikstead. But it's not as simple as ending the pact. Perhaps he seeks a means to mitigate its consequences. The consequences the people of Rorikstead are now living with, whether they know it or not, while maintaining their good fortune on the agricultural front. Now, why would Jouane Manette seek to end this pact after all this time? Well, he and Reldith have soul gems in their home. They're only petty soul gems and therefore are rather impotent for their initial purpose, but perhaps they are used as a symbol of something, and it might elaborate on their conversation sounding like plans to secretly meet up at night, or at least meet up at night without it arousing suspicion for some reason. Perhaps they found love here in Skyrim, in Rorikstead, and for one reason or another, I'm sure there are many, they're trying to keep it private. This would certainly give Jouane motivations for ending such a pact should one even exist in the first place, but even this idea is based on extremely circumstantial evidence and jumping to a few conclusions. So I cannot pretend to definitively tell you there absolutely is a conspiracy here in Rorikstead, although I genuinely do like the idea, hence I made a video about it, I suppose. And there's no denying the game is planting the suggestion that something is off about this place. There's something unnatural about the yield from the farms here. Jouane claims there are no secrets in Rorikstead, and we find him secretly tutoring a young neglected girl in magic. The game furthermore appears conscious of the lack of fully grown women in Rorikstead, and attempts to explain this as either dying in childbirth or dying shortly after childbirth, and maybe even shortly before, but that one again is conjecture. We find an incredibly rare book on Daedra in Jouane Manette's possession, and another book on Daedra in an inaccessible area that appears to be part of an incomplete space that functions as a cipher. Perhaps once upon a time that interior and that book were intended to be part of a quest, and that book grants us simple explanations that might help us identify which Daedric prince we might be dealing with. More so than any outright conspiracy, Rorikstead reeks of environmental storytelling, and beyond that, cut content. Based on what we've gone over, I believe once upon a time there was intended to be a quest about this. There are too many loose ends deliberately placed for us to pull on. There are so many things that seem like a hook for a quest that never comes, but whether or not that went along the lines of this commonly believed fan theory is anybody's guess. But as shaky as it is, it does make some sense. But I can't just say that without also saying the theory does reach rather enormously. So on that front, I'd like to know what you think. Is there a conspiracy of Daedric meddling afoot in Rorikstead's humble farming community? Perhaps you believe there's a cult operating here, or maybe you think it's a conspiracy of nonsense. Let me know in the comments. Now let's tie up some loose ends. For instance, Rorik being the founder and namesake of Rorikstead, despite the village showing up in historical records suggesting it's far more ancient than that. I think it's fair to say this detail was born from an oversight of developers not communicating what they were putting into the game that elaborately, at least on this front. The end result is Rorikstead comes across as a simultaneously ancient and fairly young village. It could easily be explained away in canon by Rorikstead eventually fading and disappearing, and a bloke named Rorik just so happened to settle on land on or nearby where that village used to be, naming his steading after himself. After all, during the Great War he was a legate in the Imperial Army, commanding a force of several dozen soldiers, most of whom were from the hold of Whiterun. So perhaps he too was from the hold of Whiterun, which may very well explain why he was named Rorik to begin with. So naturally that's where he would choose to settle down, and being aware of the Rorikstead of old, he simply refounded the steading in his name. It is patchwork really, but you can make it make sense. The other thing I'd like to mention in these closing minutes is something that if I don't, the comment section will not stop screaming about it, and that is a character we meet at the very beginning of the game as we ride to Helgen to be executed, which, as you can imagine, went splendidly. I am, of course, talking about Lokir.
The Jarl of Windhelm? You're the leader of the rebellion, but if they've captured you... Oh gods, where are they taking us?
I don't know where we're going, but Sovngarde awaits.
No, this can't be happening. This isn't happening.
Hey, what village are you from, horse thief?
Why do you care?
A Nord's last thoughts should be of home.
Rorikstead. I'm from Rorikstead.
Lokir of Rorikstead.
No, I'm not a rebel! You can't do this!
Halt!
You're not gonna kill me!
Archers! Anyone else feel like running?
Well, they did indeed kill him. Now, where this factors, of course, is nobody in Rorikstead mentions Lokir once, and I think the explanation for this is rather straightforward. Firstly, though he is originally from Rorikstead, something tells me he hasn't been back in a while. If the Rorikstead conspiracy holds any water, then his mother likely died when he was young, and since his dialogue suggests he's been indulgent in a life of crime for some time, perhaps a father figure wasn't altogether present either. Moreover, being unscrupulous by profession, something tells me he isn't keenly missed in the village, and his desire to flee to Hammerfell can easily be explained by him otherwise being wanted by the authorities. Another solid explanation for why nobody seems to care could be the idea that Rorikstead, along with the entirety of Skyrim as presented in the game, is highly scaled down from its canon size, its canon population. I'm conscious of this logic, but I'm very careful where I apply it, as if used to dismiss something improperly, it can unravel the entirety of the world building. Nonetheless, Lokir's presence at the beginning of the game, and Rorikstead as we find it later on, are completely unrelated despite Lokir being from here. So the people here probably don't mention him nor remember him because A, we don't have the option to ask about him, and B, they may not have even known him. His family may be long moved on, for instance, which is especially believable when you take into consideration the landscape of his criminal lifestyle. After all, that had to begin somewhere. That's not to say the people here don't vaguely know about him as somebody who used to live here, they just have very little reason to mention him in passing conversation with anyone, because what is there really to say? And finally, a thing worthy of mention would be Eric himself. Eric yearns for the life of an adventurer despite his father's protests, and should we help him with that problem, he will become Eric the Slayer, whom we can hire as a mercenary follower. This is hugely not of relevance to the topic of today's video, but this is based on a fellow named Eric West, a knowledgeable Elder Scrolls fan known on the forums as Imok the Slayer. He sadly passed away in 2011 from cancer prior to the release of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, and the devs wanted to pay tribute. In conversation with this old man, you might catch him talking about a basement in the inn that the inn doesn't have. I think this is another instance of the scaling of the world in the game differing from the canon world, and I don't necessarily believe there to be a hidden basement. However, Eric's most interesting dialogue has absolutely nothing to do with Rorikstead at all.
If I can make enough money here in Skyrim, I think I'll travel to Hammerfell and see what work I can get there.
Beyond that, I can't think of anything else to mention aside from maybe the fact that every older bloke in town has a hairline that has seen better days. Perhaps another sacrifice in a pact with Clavicus Vile in exchange for fertile soil, I don't know. But jokes aside, that wraps up all the loose ends I had listed. Once again, let me know your thoughts on whether or not you believe there is indeed any form of conspiracy here in Rorikstead. I'm unconvinced, though I like the idea. Unfortunately, there isn't much to confirm anything, but this theory has been circulating for years, and was quite commonly requested in my previous Skyrim videos that I give it a go. Hopefully, I've done it justice. But you know what? Thank you all for watching. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff. It would be massively appreciated, of course only if you want to, and a massive whopping Happy New Year. If you fancy dropping me a follow on some social media, I'd be hugely grateful, but again, the choice is yours. But with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point, but until next time, please take care, and goodbye.